Welcome to the Money Answer Show with host Jordan Goodman. Whether you are starting out, deep into your retirement, or somewhere in between, the Money Answer Show has the know-how to help you. Now here's your host, Jordan Goodman.
Welcome to the Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Michael Taylor. He is a personal finance journalist, writes for various newspapers. He's also done a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates, Invest Before Paying Off Debt, and Other Tips Your Professors Didn't Teach You. Welcome to the Money Answer Show, Michael.
Jordan, thank you so much.
Let's just get a little bit of your background. You were in the financial business for a while. Just a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, yeah. I guess the top of the resume is I used to work for Goldman Sachs. I was a bond salesman. I was a vice president, which I like to joke is a heartbeat away from the presidency, except there are about 6,000 of us. And I sold emerging market bonds and mortgage bonds. The mortgage bonds was my last stint at Goldman, and it was a couple of years before the crisis. But one of my jokes there is that I was part of a small cog in the machine that created the weapons of mass financial destruction that nearly took us down in 2008. After that, I ran an investment fund, and starting in about 2012, I started writing and teaching about finance, and I can give you more reasons for that. But the brief resume is Wall Street, then my own distressed debt investing fund, and then been teaching and writing about finance ever since.
So a lot of people getting out of college these days, what is their state of financial literacy, and therefore why do you think you needed to do this book?
Oh, boy, there's so much there. The financial literacy, and I'm going to make up a number, but see if it resonates with you and with your listeners. But I think somewhere between 90 and 95% of people go, I'm not a finance person. I don't really get this. And I think there's maybe a 5 to 10% of folks who are super lucky because they had a parent who knew what was going on or was sophisticated. But in general, I'm going to make a gross up generalization. We don't get taught this in college. We don't get taught this in high school. We don't get taught it in junior high, which is probably when it should start. So most people muddle through for decades. And my demographic, I'm 46, I think is starting to figure out the consequences of what they do and that they could kind of get it. But they also appreciate this book because they go, some of these things I know what I'm doing. A lot of things I don't yet know what I'm doing. But over a couple of decades, you start to get it. The average 22-year-old I talk to hasn't even been faced with the problems yet. So they have a lot of questions.
Your blog is at bankers-anonymous.com. What kind of things can people find at your blog site?
Yeah, so that was inspired post-crisis. And the Bankers Anonymous is really a reference to we need to get sober and serious about finances. And I felt very mission-driven after the crisis that I understood finances, and a lot of people didn't. And that was, in some sense, a reason for the crisis. The average person trying to pay their mortgage didn't understand it. The journalists were bad at this. The bankers were also misinformed, and regulators and politicians also. So I was originally wrote a lot about Wall Street, and because I came from there, and it evolved over time. People want to be like, well, how do I deal with my home equity line of credit, or what should I think about credit cards, or hey, I've been pitching an annuity, which I do. So I began to develop over time in response to questions. Oh, people really have a lot of personal finance questions. But I roam around. I write for 2 Texas newspapers, so I tend to cover some Texas-based stories that end up on my blog also, because that's where I live, and it's a big state, and Texans are very patriotic, so they want to hear about themselves.
How is your book and this kind of rules for new college graduates different from other? There's tons of personal finance books out there. How is yours different from the other ones?
Yeah, there's no limitation to personal finance books out there. The first thing I would say is that I don't know if you feel this way. You've written many books, right? 13 or something.
Yes.
I found I was writing this book out of, this is a big motivator, because I was mad about other things that I saw out there. So one of the things that makes me mad, and it's reflected in the book, is that personal finance books generally assume that the good behavior they're trying to encourage readers is based on something called compound interest. And you might have a table in the book that shows the effects of compound interest, both because of how to avoid high interest debt or how to invest for the long run, but they never teach the math. And I have found that if you can teach the math to somebody, they no longer have to depend upon a guru. They can say, wait, I can do this myself in a spreadsheet. I don't need to take your word for it or take this on faith. I can figure out why these are the right behaviors. So number one difference is from any other finance book I've ever read is it's dedicated to the non-expert audience, is I can teach you this math, and you should absolutely learn it, and it'd be not a very long period of time to learn it. So I dedicate it at great, I would say, risk, chapters 4 and 5, very early on in the book. Like, here, we're going to have some math chapters. So that's a turnoff because people are allergic to it. But I feel like I had to do that because when I read other books, they don't teach it. And they just assume, well, just trust me that this math works this way, and now I'm going to tell you all the good behaviors. That's the first way it's different. I guess I would say the second way it's different, I would like to think is many of the finance books that I've read are almost written by CPAs for CPAs or assume a kind of a dry approach. So I'd like to think mine's a little bit funny and a little bit edgier than that. Those are my two main distinguishing characteristics. Yeah. But, when you read, can I ask you, so you've written a lot and you've had presumably lots of reader response to your stuff. When you read a personal finance book that you didn't write, or when you wrote your own, how are you trying to distinguish from other ones out there?
Yeah, well, you're right. Yours definitely has a kind of edge to it. And it's assuming people don't know that much and you're just trying to help them out. It's a very practically helpful kind of book. I mean, my style is to give people resources and websites and practical things that help them put the advice into action. Everybody's got their own angle.
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of what you talk about is kind of behavioral change. What is the one biggest behavioral change you'd suggest for a young person that's going to ultimately make them wealthy?
Well, I started the book talking about 3 characteristics of wealthy people, but maybe I'll mention those 3. It's hard to distinguish one of them, but one of them is modesty. So modesty would be in both what do we think we can know and how much do we need to know or think we need to know. Another would be optimism, because I think you can't do it right if you don't believe that things could work out. And then skepticism. I think you need to approach gurus and financial media with an attitude of skepticism. So, modesty for a young person starting out, to answer your question more directly, modesty has to do with, consumption and can you afford that nice car for the next couple of years? Do you need a kind of a car that's not as good as you deserve, or can you live in a place that is cheaper and more modest than you're used to? Because generally, when you're 23, your first job is not going to pay you enough.
Yeah. What are some of the things available now in 2019 in the investing world that weren't really available or even true when you started this 10 and 20 years ago? What are some of the new things available today?
Yeah, so that is I think a totally great thing. So, 40 years ago, you had to walk into the wood-paneled, leather-bound chair stockbroker's place. And now you don't need to do that. And then my generation, you could go online to E-Trade, but now you have these mobile investing apps where they keep it so simple, robo-investing type of thing. Whereas if you had a little bit of guidance or you were able to self-teach, almost everything you need to do to invest in an incredibly simple way is a couple of mobile phone app clicks and nearly free, connected to your bank account. And if you could have the discipline to set something up and then forget it, set it and forget it, there's not a lot you're missing that would be different from what a highly expensive, specialized stockbroker role from 40 years ago or 20 years ago could give you. You could pretty much get as far as you needed to get, practically on your phone. Of course, if you had the confidence and knew what you were doing. There's a lot of ways you would also do it wrong. The do-it-yourself movement that's allowed by these mobile phone investing apps and robo-advising is also dangerous, double-edged sword, obviously.
But so you're a big believer in passive investing and automatic investing and not doing individual stock trading and being active that way. Is that right? I am, yeah. Look, there's lots of people who have a lot of fun investing, and that's great, picking stocks. And certainly there are some examples of great investors who dedicate themselves full-time to picking out opportunities. Famously, Warren Buffett comes to mind. On the other hand, most of us don't have that skill. And so probably most of us should be doing the low-cost, low-effort thing, which is passive investing. Okay. All right. I think we're actually going to go to a break now and then come back and get into the details of the book. My guest this hour is Michael Taylor. He's a financial journalist. He writes for the San Antonio Express-News and the Houston Chronicle. His new book is called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates: Invest Before Paying Off Debt and Other Tips Your Professor Didn't Teach You. His website to find out more about him and his blog is bankers-anonymous.com. We'll be back after this.
We're always talking business. Talk to an expert. Call now toll free 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
Many industries have been revolutionized by technology in the last decade. Books, music, TV, communications, and now it's happening to our money and the way we pay. Tune in to Breaking Banks with Brett King for a look at how technology and customer behavior will bring about more changes in banking in the next 10 years than in the last 200 years. Listen every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific on Voice America Business Channel or on AM 1160 The Voice. You'll never look at your bank account the same again.
Attention heroes, current and former firefighters, law enforcement, military, medical, or educational professionals. Heroes can receive rewards averaging over $2,500 when they buy, sell, or refinance a home. Heroes come first. Along with the Homes for Heroes is the nation's largest hero reward program. Their mission is to provide extraordinary savings to heroes who provide extraordinary services to our nation and its communities every day. Learn how you can purchase a home for no down payment, no closing costs, and get money back at closing. Find out how you can own for less than you may pay for rent. Get your hero rewards at heroescomefirst.com. That's heroes, HEROES, comefirst.com. 888-437-6114. Jordan Goodman is an affiliate. He recognizes quality solutions, forming relationships to help improve the lives of his listeners.
Game-changing technologies and strategies are transformational, exciting, and disruptive for a reason. They shake up your status quo. They get you thinking about new ways to scale, compete, and grow. They move you in amazing new directions. You're invited to take your coffee break with Game Changers on Tuesdays at 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time for our special series on digital selling. Learn how you can become the savvy leader who takes your company across the finish line as you look ahead to the next wave of business innovation. Changing the Game with Digital Selling, presented by SAP on the Business Channel. Tune in to the Voice America Variety channel on the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Voice America Variety broadcasts a diverse array of topics, reaching a global community. Our experts come from all walks of life, and the topics they discuss are everything from current events, arts and entertainment, leadership, parenting, relationships, self-improvement, career advice, and a variety of other topics. Check us out today. You're sure to find something of interest. Voice America Variety. Talk on today's hot topics.
You've been listening to The Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. If you have a question for Jordan or his guest, please call us now at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now back to Jordan.
Welcome back to The Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Michael Taylor. He is a financial journalist, writes for some newspapers in Texas. He's also come out with a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates, Invest Before Paying Off Debt, and Other Tips Your Professors Didn't Teach You. You can find out more about him and his website and his blog at bankers-anonymous.com. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
So in the beginning of your book, you say you should be wealthy. So kind of just talk about that as to the attitude people should have towards their long-term financial situation.
Well, I think what I would call three wealthy person attitudes, which I mentioned before: skepticism, optimism, and modesty. And I like to start with the attitudes because everybody's situation is different, but we probably all need to adopt this common approach if you're going to get, or even I would say stay wealthy. Because even if you were born into incredible wealth, it's hard to maintain it if you don't have the right attitudes. That's where I would start, at least attitudinally.
Okay. Now, you talk about the financial infotainment industrial complex, both TV and radio and magazines and so on. What is the trap that people fall into by getting consumed by the financial infotainment complex?
Yeah, I think that media, and look, I'm in media, you're in media, so obviously we can be good people producing financial media, but I feel like in aggregate, if we are not careful consumers or receivers or filterers of financial media, we can be carried along with a series of messages that are ultimately going to undermine our long-term, decade over decade building of wealth. I think media has an incentive. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like media has an incentive to get an emotional response from people. So you can take a very ordinary situation, and if you can make it incredibly scary and appeal to fear, or you can make it incredibly tasty seeming and appeal to greed, fear and greed being the two motivators on Wall Street, then you can capture people's attention. And then, frankly, a lot of media is built around selling things. So if you don't know that and you don't have another way of filtering the financial media that you absorb, you could be, I think, whipped around. And I don't even mean bad guys selling us bad products. I mean the good guys. Like experts, very respectable, the bond king, or very respectable hedge fund manager, or bankers or insurance executives, folks I worked with at Goldman Sachs. What people who don't work in the industry don't know is that these folks all actually sell products. That's kind of why they became experts. And I'm an expert because I used to sell products. So it's hard to distinguish between the folks who are giving us independent advice and people who are selling us stuff. And usually they're the same person, which I just think we should understand. They don't, I think, like a lot of things, when I was growing up, they put the warning sticker on the music albums, but financial media should have a warning sticker on it, which is these people are probably selling you something. So be aware of that. Doesn't mean don't consume it, but just be a very skeptical consumer of financial media. That's my view. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
So how should people consume? Should they not watch CNBC or not get magazines or books? Or, I mean, it's all tilted, or how should they consume financial media?
So I want to say, I don't mean it's fake news. That's a weird, phrase that has taught us to distrust media, and I don't think it's that. It's that the media has an agenda, and the agenda is not to make you wealthy. The agenda is to get you an emotional response from you, and then to capture your attention, and then ultimately, your eyeballs for an advertiser. So we should know that and be skeptical. The best suggestion I could give, the joking suggestion is, in many ways, to do the right thing. You want to be Rip Van Winkle and do something. Don't be completely media naive for 40 years and then wake up and you'll probably be rich because you haven't done the dumb things in the 40 years. But if we're not literally going to be Rip Van Winkle, so the next best, probably more realistic piece of advice I can give is consume a lot less of ephemeral media, stuff that lasts, for a day or a month, and try to consume more media that's 3 years and 10 years and 30-year oriented, and that's essentially just books. Books are oriented towards decades, and blogs are oriented towards the next hour. And so if we can strongly skew towards books, you're probably going to end up with a better set of messages than things that are skewed to capturing your attention for the next hour. So then I read a blog and I read a newspaper column, and the newspaper column most newspaper columns have a shelf life of about a week. And that's not long enough. We have to have decades in mind, I think, when we're trying to do the right thing.
Yes. Then you have a whole chapter about interest rates, and you call interest rates in practice the time value of money concept. What are some basic things about interest rates that most people don't understand that you were trying to get across here?
Yeah, this is a very frustrating thing. I wonder what you think here, but I taught college students. My book is essentially a result of teaching college students and not liking the texts that were there. But these are really smart people at Trinity University, and they don't know what the interest rate is on their student loans. They don't have any idea. And then when they do figure out their interest rate, they don't know how to calculate, all right, well, then what's your monthly? No one's ever taught them how to do that on a spreadsheet. This is not beyond fifth grade math, but no one's ever taught them. So first you have to know your interest rate, and then the next piece would be, can you distinguish very carefully between what is a high interest rate, and in today's environment, anything above 8 to 10% is pretty darn high, and what's a low interest rate, and that would be the 1 to 5 or 6%. And then if you can distinguish between those interest rates, and you could do the math to figure out, all right, so how does that either affect you as a person paying on debt or affect you as a person earning interest or earning a return on an investment, can you then do the next step, which is what it will be the compounding effects of those interest rates over time. And if you could do that, then you would be a very long way towards understanding how why the advice that people give you is given with mathematical certainty. It's just not really taught that way. But the first step would be, do you know what your interest rates are, and can you calculate? Okay, so what's the monthly, and then can you do the later step?
So related to that is compound interest. One of your mathematical chapters is about compound interest. People kind of understand it in general, but what's the specific idea, without going into all the math in the chapter, that people should understand about how compound interest works?
Yeah, this is the magic behind everything, both how interest works against you in debt or how it works for you in terms of investments. If I was going to give somebody the first lesson would be our brains have a really hard time understanding exponential growth math. So why is it that the $5,000 vacation in Hawaii actually costs you $34,000 if you pay it off over 15 years? That's why. Or why does a simple IRA investment of $5,000, how would that plausibly become worth $500,000 50 years later? Well, it's just 10% math. So we have really hard. So the first rule is you wouldn't know this by instinct. You would have to do this by really working through the math. So that's the first lesson. This is not logical. It's beyond. Exponential math does not occur to our brains easily. The second would be actually doing the math and being able to learn how to do it in a spreadsheet, which I have YouTube videos teaching that, and I try to teach it as a recipe in my 2 chapters, is very much the work of just probably a couple of hours, and anybody who has gotten through junior high or high school math could do this. It's not beyond almost anybody. But we haven't been taught it because I think professors and teachers don't realize the importance of it. So my second lesson would be this is doable. And there's hundreds of people teaching this, probably thousands of people teaching this for free on YouTube, but we've just never been told that capturing this would, I think, unlock all the reasons why people are giving a certain type of advice in personal finance. It's because of compound interest, both the way it works against you in terms of debt and the way it can work for you in terms of investments and savings.
The next chapter, you talk about the other math, which is discounting cash flows, which is the way you analyze a stock and what the dividends it might be in the future. Just what is the basic concept of discounted cash flow that people need to know?
Yeah, discounted cash flows is the same algebra formula as compound interest, but solving for a different variable is the first thing to know. So this isn't more complicated than compound interest. It's the same thing. And the second thing is this is what every bank and every insurance company and every pension program, so these massive forces that we are interacting with for our savings, investments, loans, and pensions, they are all based on this math concept of discounting cash flows. We don't know it because people don't describe it that way, but it is the fundamental math that is driving everything. And I think knowing the math puts you at an incredible advantage with respect to talking to your insurance broker, your banker, the folks who are running your pension, the folks who are running your retirement account, because you go, oh, I know what they're doing. They're not doing wizardry. They're not doing magic. This is math, and I could understand it, and I could have a informed conversation, and I could ask them questions, and I could be skeptical about what the product is from the insurance company because I know the math that they're doing. And if they don't understand the math and they can't answer my question, then maybe I need to be skeptical about the experts in my life. So I see it as a huge equalizer. If you were to understand the math that is being done to you, then you can, in a sense, turn the tables and go, wait, I know what they're doing now, and I can ask good questions and I can respond appropriately. It also happens to be for investors like Warren Buffett and originally before him, Benjamin Graham, this is how you'd fundamentally invest. This is, if you were into a do-it-yourself investment approach, you'd need to know this math because it's how you invest. It's the basis for all investing. It's the basis for valuing stocks and bonds and everything else. That's
the key. So how do you use discounted cash flow to value stocks? It's at a price today, but then you can project what the cash flow would be. How do you use that to make sure you're not paying too much for a stock today?
Well, so this is interesting. I'll give you the quick idea. I'll see if I can explain it quickly, and then I'll give you the more skeptical idea about why it would be really hard in practice to do it. The quick idea, the theoretical finance idea, is that the reason why stocks are valuable is because we have a claim as a tiny owner of a company or a fractional owner of a company to all future profits. So theoretically, if you knew what the profits would be of a company going forward, then you could put that all into a spreadsheet, and applying this math formula, you could say, well, these future profits in years 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to year 50 and infinity can be mathematically converted into dollars today, and that would be the application of the discounting cash flow formula. And if you can do that, and it's not hard to model. It's hard to come up with what we think the future profits are. That's the hard part. But the math part is a easy spreadsheet work that a junior high kid could do it in a spreadsheet. Then you could get a single number today that tells you what the future profits are worth. And essentially that is the worth of a company with a few adjustments like do they own hard assets like buildings and other things. But that gives you a fundamental baseline value of a stock or any investment that's based on cash flows like a bond. So that's what you do, and that's how it's done. Like I said, the math is relatively easy. The skeptical part, the really hard part, is that we can be fooled by models, and by that I mean that all assumes that you are inputting a number into here's what the profits will be 10 years from now, 12 years from now, 15 years from now. So even though you're being very mathematical and scientific, these are highly uncertain things. So we have to be re-skeptical again that we actually know what the profits are 10 years ago. And, this is guesswork. And it's science, but it's also a lot of art. So we can't be that precise. We could come up with a number, but again, we should be aware that these numbers are based on some art, not just pure science.
Yeah. Future isn't quite that certain. Very good. All right. We have to take another break.
Highly uncertain, which makes fundamental value investing very difficult.
Yes. All right, we have to take another break. This is Jordan Goodman of the Money Answer Show. My guest this hour is Michael Taylor. He's a financial journalist. He's written a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates. You can see more about him and his blog and his website at bankers-anonymous.com. We'll be back after this.
Stocks, bonds, investment opportunities, financial news, and talk. We can help. Call us now toll free, 866-472-5790. 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
Do you or someone you love have a life insurance policy that's no longer needed or not affordable? Did you know that you can sell your policy for cash? Your reason for buying life insurance has probably changed. Thousands of Americans turn to life insurance settlements to help sell their policies. They act as your representative, getting the highest market offer for you. You've got nothing to lose by simply inquiring. If you're over 64 with $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may already qualify. Call 877-485-6681 to get your free non-binding appraisal or visit fundinglife.com. Life Insurance Settlements. Discover the true value of your life insurance. 877-485-6681. Jordan Goodman is an affiliate. He recognizes quality solutions, forming relationships to help improve the lives of his listeners.
You've been listening to The Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. If you have a question for Jordan or his guest, please call us now at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now back to Jordan.
Welcome back to The Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour is Michael Taylor. He's a personal financial journalist. He's written a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates. You can also find more about him and his blog at bankers-anonymous.com. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
So you have a chapter on high interest debt. What are some of the highest interest debt vehicles out there, and how should people deal with them?
Well, the most common one is, of course, credit card debt. They're as easy to acquire as catching a cold by, walking down the street. It's very easy to get credit card debt, and generally the interest rates, unless you have a special teaser rate, start at about 12%, and they can go as high as 29.99%. So that's what everybody has in their wallet, the availability of high interest debt. It's very easy to get. And one of the things I think about personal finance is if you have high interest debt, and half of Americans do carry balance from month to month, so it's extremely common that you would have high interest credit card debt. The good news, bad news, the silver lining of having a balance is you don't need to know anything about personal finance except pay down your high interest debt. It gets really simple. There's nothing complicated. Just pay it down, and you will massively improve your situation. And you don't need to be sophisticated at all about it. Just pay it off. So that's the high interest debt we have in our wallets. There's other, I would say, equally bad or even worse stuff. We have subprime auto loans and subprime mortgages, and if we've readers of news from 10 years ago remember what happened with subprime mortgages, there's high interest. There's even worse stuff like payday loans, and that's a very common thing, and those are even higher rates of interest. And that would be even more urgently pay that down, and your financial situation would be vastly improved if you are subject to high interest debt. It gets real simple at that point.
The reason people do payday loans and subprime home loans and car loans is they can't qualify for traditional lower interest loans. So if somebody's in that circumstance, they needed to buy a car and their credit isn't good enough, what do you tell them to do? Don't do a subprime loan, car loan, or what are they supposed to do if they can't qualify for traditional credit?
Yeah, the problem of a car, if you have bad credit or weak credit, is a lot of people need a car. So in order to be employed, you need a car. In order to get your kids from here to the doctor's office, you need a car. So I think all you can control at that point is what is the price I'm willing to pay for a car. So don't get a subprime auto loan on a $25,000 truck. Try to get if you have to get a subprime auto loan, try to get it on the $7,000 ugly beat-up truck. All you can control at that point is the price. I would say people who have been onto a car lot have had the salesperson say, how much can you afford per month? And I would say that's a trick question. The right question is, what's the lowest cost vehicle you can possibly buy that gets you from point A to point B? And if you need a subprime auto loan, it's bad, but you probably need a car. So get the cheapest possible car you can get until you can pay that thing down and improve your credit. At that point, you're allowed to, stretch a little bit. But you probably just need to get a terrible looking car because a subprime $25,000 car is just too much. You'll never get out from under it.
Then you have a chapter on saving and how to set up kind of automatic savings systems. Somebody coming out of college who may have a lot of student loan debt, isn't earning that much, how can they set up savings when it seems like they need all their money to pay their debts?
Yeah, the classic thing is everybody says, well, do a budget. And not being a budgeter myself, and I believe 5% of people are budgeters and the rest, 95% of us, are not. I don't think that is the right approach to it. I do think the right and only way that I'm sure works is to automate. And by that I mean you go to your bank and you say, I get paid on the first of the month, and that means on the first or the second of the month, bank, please automatically take out X amount of dollars, whether it's $10 or $25 or $100, whatever you can afford, and put it into an account that I can't access very often or very easily, so that it is out of my spending account. Because psychologically, I believe most people need that trick. We are generally not strong enough not to spend whatever's in our account. And then the next thing I would say for a college student who is 23 years old, you got your first job, the rule of 23-year-olds is you are not being paid enough money to actually afford whatever city you live in. The costs of that city are built around 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds who've been through a series of raises and bonuses, and they have a cushion, which you don't have, which means you're probably going to have to be a lot more brutal, at least for a couple of years, than you want to be. You have a worse car and a worse housing than you deserve. But that's just the breaks, because the cost of living, no matter where you are, is just too high. It's not built for you. It's built for somebody who gets paid more than you. So I think that we should just know that. It's not forever. You don't have to have a terrible car and a terrible house for too many years, but you need to survive a couple of years' worth of not getting into debt and putting away a little bit of savings. And then I think it's doable. That's my approach.
Yeah. Then you have a whole section on the FICO score. What do people not understand about their credit scores, and what should they understand?
Yeah, there's only one number, 720, that matters if you want the lowest price loans. You don't need an 800 FICO. You need a 720, and then you can qualify. If you are below 720, there's a little range where you're in the in-between range and you're not going to get the best deal, but you're going to get an okay deal. And then below that, you're stuck getting a very bad deal. And by bad deal, I mean if you go to borrow money from a mortgage lender or an auto lender, you're going to pay a lot more. So this is cruel. This is the less money you have, the more you pay, and the more money you have, the less you pay. So it's an upside-down world, but this is true in many areas of personal finance. And a great way to save money is to, if you're in that situation of not good credit and paying too much, is work very hard to improve your credit score. And I guess the next thing I would say about your credit score is don't get fooled into doing things that the banking industry wants you to do to manage your credit in fancy ways and pay them high fees to monitor. I just don't believe in that. Just do the right thing, which is pay off your debts on time. And if you are behind, fix it or negotiate it down. But don't try to don't pay for a lot of fancy credit monitoring. Don't take out credit in order to build credit. This is an insane approach that doesn't make any sense unless you're a banker to push people to do that. Be very modest about your borrowing and very skeptical that you have to do anything to manage your credit. Just pay your bills. And if you haven't paid your bills, then start paying your bills.
Then you've got a whole section on retirement accounts, and some of the advice you give is kind of controversial, is that you should do retirement investing, whether it be an IRA or Roth IRA, before you start paying down high-interest debt. Tell us the pros and cons of that.
Well, this is complicated, and reasonable people can certainly disagree with me. My main lesson, the controversial thing I say, and it's in the subtitle of the book, which is Invest Before Paying Off Debt, is that even in your 20s, when you have student loan debt, it is appropriate to invest in either an IRA or even if you have a great job, a 401k or a 403b. The tax advantages of the IRA and the 401k and 403b, as well as the compounding effects of having 40 years for your money to grow, are very plausibly mathematically justifiable even while you're paying debt. And the more that your debt is low interest debt, which would be mostly student loans for somebody in their early 20s, but then eventually a prime auto loan or a prime mortgage, as long as those are prime and low interest, it is mathematically justifiable to maintain debt while investing for the long run. I don't mean trading stocks around in a day trading. That's very tax inefficient. It's not going to work. But in a tax-advantaged, long-term, I'm talking 40-year vehicle here, then it is mathematically justifiable. It is also controversial in the sense that you don't want to be in a situation where you never pay off your debt. You don't want to put in too much into retirement, and high-interest debt, you don't want to invest much in your retirement account. If you have high-interest debt, it's not as mathematically justifiable. And then there's a psychological component, which is being debt-free is a very freeing thing, and we can have different attitude towards risk and debt, which would make my advice overly controversial or just deeply uncomfortable for folks who don't want to have debt. They want to be debt-free.
So what you're saying, though, it may be difficult psychologically if you've got this debt, whether it be student loan debt or credit card debt, to pay that down more slowly to get the investment engine started at a younger age. Because a lot of people don't think about investing in their 20s. They say, let me attack my debts first, particularly student loan debt, and start investing later. You're saying that's a mistake.
It's very hard to mathematically justify carrying a credit card balance and investing. Credit card balances, credit card rates are just 18%, 25%, even 12%. You can't mathematically justify that very much unless you have this combination in a 401k of a match and tax advantages where it's plausible. But generally speaking, credit card debt is not compatible with long-term investing, carrying a balance and paying on that. Having a student loan, which is at this point 4%, 5% debt, it is mathematically justifiable to carry that debt while also investing. Similarly with a prime mortgage of 4% or a prime auto loan of 3.5%. It's mathematically justifiable. But again, some people feel differently. I do think you shouldn't put there. It is common to say you have to pay off all your debts before investing. I don't think you should wait until your 30s, let's say, before you start investing. The power of compounding is so extraordinary that it is, from my view, mathematically provable that some investing in the right way for the long run can be mathematically justified if you have low interest debt, not credit card debt, but student loan debt and a prime mortgage or prime auto.
And this is assuming you're going to get the average long-term rate of return on stocks and mutual funds of 9 or 10%. I mean, sometimes the stock market falls for a while, but you're saying in the long run, you're going to probably always do better.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other assumptions which I kind of don't get to until later chapters, but this also means you're not tempted to do a lot of trading around. You're not going to, you were able to get the long term in part only because you're really putting this away for 40 years and you're not tempted to mess with it. So that's a key component of this.
Very good. Okay, we're going to take another break. This is Jordan Goodman of the Money Answer Show. My guest this hour is Michael Taylor. He has come out with a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates. You can get it at Amazon, all the different usual places. His website is bankers-anonymous.com. We'll be back after this.
From the boardroom to you, Voice America Business Network.
Are you a homeowner tired of making monthly mortgage payments with little progress towards paying down your principal? Does paying off your home in 5 to 7 years without making larger or more frequent payments sound appealing? Paying off your home in full in 5 to 7 years is really possible thanks to Truth and Equity's Mortgage Equity Optimization System, a money management approach that puts your money to work for you 24/7. If you own a home with some equity, have a decent credit score, and verifiable income, you owe it to yourself to learn more about Truth and Equity's program. There's no need to replace your mortgage or refinance in many cases. The system works for new home purchases as well as current mortgages. Your home is your largest investment. Own it outright in 5 to 7 years. Call Truth and Equity 888-262-5540 or visit truthandequity.com 888-262-5540. Jordan Goodman is an affiliate. He recognizes quality solutions, forming relationships to help improve the lives of his listeners.
You've been listening to The Money Answer Show with Jordan Goodman. If you have a question for Jordan or his guest, please call us now at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now back to Jordan.
Welcome back to The Money Answer Show. This is Jordan Goodman, your host. My guest this hour, Michael Taylor, has written a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates. You can see more at his website, bankers-anonymous.com. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
You talk about cars, so how should you make the right decision on paying cash for a car versus taking out a loan?
Yeah, well, most of us don't have the choice to pay cash until later on in life, so you're probably taking out a loan. It would be lovely to pay cash. The reason to really try to pay cash is you probably end up paying, if you only have $8,000 in cash, you're going to buy a kind of a beat-up used car, and that might be a good decision, especially if you're young. Most of us are not going to have the cash to do it, so you're going to take out a loan. I think the key there is, can you keep your payment as small as possible through buying less car than you think you want or that you think you deserve? And I like to just remind people that you're not buying your personality at the car dealership. You are trying to get a declining asset, a consumer asset that's going to lose value over time, like a washing machine. And this is to get you from point A to point B. It's not to prove to people that you have sex appeal and that you are the world's greatest lover, which is what car advertisements would like to tell you. It's just this is to get you from home to work and back.
So what are things, some mistakes people make in dealing with car dealers when they're buying a car?
I think car dealers, one is thinking that because you did some research online, you did consumer reports, that you are on par in terms of information with the car dealer and the car salesman. And I would say you do this, we do this once every 5 years or once every 15 or 20 years, and they do this 4 times a day. So they have extraordinary advantage in negotiating over the car. We are not on an equal footing, which means just be cautious. Of course, do your research online, but you don't have the information the salesperson has. So that's number one, is be skeptical that you are on an equal footing. And the second is the question of how much can you afford per month, which is what they ask you, is a deceptive question that glosses over how much is the debt, how much is the car, and how much car do you really need? Those are the 3 essential questions. The how much can you afford per month is a way of mixing those up and I think really confusing folks about how much car they can afford. Generally, we should probably buy less car than we can afford.
Yeah.
Because it's a bad
chapter. Let's go on houses next. How should people make buying versus renting decision in their younger years?
Yeah, there's a lot of math calculations you can do. The basic question I have is, are you going to be there for 5 years? If you're going to be there for 5 years, you can, I think, simplify your decision and go, it is probably going to work out to own a home. On the other hand, most people in their 20s don't know they're going to be in the same place for 5 years. So that's, I would say, the 5-year rule is how I would have somebody resolve this, rather than doing a lot of fancy math on online calculators of rent versus buy. There's a lot of unknowables in those fancy calculators. The knowable thing is, am I going to stay for 5 years? If you do, usually homeownership works. If you can't, then it might work or it might not work.
Apparently, you're not a big fan of flipping houses, and people see this on TV all the time. What's wrong with flipping houses?
Oh, everything. But the short way of thinking about this is, and this comes from my experience on Wall Street, is the people who know how to make money doing a certain type of thing don't spend their time teaching everybody else how to do the thing. They just do the thing. So if your thing is flipping houses, just make your money flipping houses. Don't go on television and radio and special programs teaching other people. That's not how real people who are good at this do this. They just make their money flipping the houses. So be very skeptical about people who are teaching you how to make money. And that applies to a lot of areas, like FX trading or all sorts of futures trading, all sorts of stuff. Flipping houses
doing
is
it, not
one of the
teaching.
more egregious examples.
Right.
Yeah.
You have a whole chapter on insurance. You come down pretty strongly on term versus cash value. Why should people do term instead of cash value insurance?
The math there is complicated, but the question you should ask when buying insurance is, what's the risk I'm transferring from my household, some catastrophic financial risk from my household to a big company, the insurance company. And I think when you get term, so that's 5-year or 10-year or 20-year insurance, it's much clearer, it can be made much clearer, what risk am I transferring? And probably, if you're buying 10-year term, you're transferring the risk that you, as the income earner in your household, are not going to leave your dependents, your spouse, your kids, bereft of money. But if you buy whole life insurance, it often gets mixed up in a whole investing process, which I think is confusing to the average person. In that confusion, the insurance salesman can make their money. So I think you're less likely to be confused, and you're less likely to overpay for insurance when you do term insurance.
You have a chapter on work, and you say people should take the lottery test when they're at work and looking at their salary. What is the lottery test, and how does that work?
Yeah, we do. We have the fantasy, like, what would you do if you won the lottery? And I think that if your answer is, I would quit my job, the famous country song, take this job and shove it, if that's your answer, it's an indicator that you don't like your job that much and that you probably need to think about getting a better job. I think one of the things that makes you wealthy over your life is, are you in a job that you like? Are you good at what you do? Do you enjoy doing it? And you're probably going to work at it for many more years and much harder and have much more success. But if you take the lottery test and you're like, I would take this job and shove it as soon as I won, well, then you need to work on your work. You're probably not doing good work that lights you up and makes you feel valuable, and you're probably not going to make as much money and enjoy it and do as well if you don't. So the lottery test is very useful for that. And we've all had the fantasy, of course, of winning the lottery. And by the way, nobody should buy lottery tickets, but I've been guilty myself. When it gets really big, yeah, I've bought a lottery ticket, I'll admit it. But it's not a good fantasy in terms of, are you doing the right thing with your life, probably, if you're having that fantasy all the time, or if you're actually buying the lottery tickets.
Yes. You have a chapter on death, where you talk about what you should do with your remaining lifespan and what you call aspirational wealth. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think death is useful for figuring out what are our priorities. I don't think we need to add a lot of zeros to our bank account, and sometimes death of a loved one or contemplating our own mortality, you start to go, there's a lot of things I don't need a big bank account for that might be how I should actually be spending my time or spending my emotional energy. So that's why I think death is a useful mirror to hold up to your life and go, do I have my priorities right? And you could be a very modest amounts of money in the bank and still be, I would consider, wealthy. Or you could be a really rich person who never feels like you have enough. And sometimes mortality is a way of clarifying these things.
Yeah. You end your book with the epilogue on being wealthy, and you talk about philanthropy. You're saying you should focus and not diversify when you get to philanthropy. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that as the opposite of investing. The classic investing idea is diversify, and people can disagree about that, but it's generally accepted for most people's situation. You want to diversify. In philanthropy, I don't think you should do a scatter shot of when my friends call, I send a $100 check, or if your means allow. Some people who are very wealthy, here, have a $10,000 or $25,000 check, or here's a $50 check. But without engaging in the actual problem or the actual organization, I have found it much more rewarding in my life, and I find talking to folks who are involved in philanthropy, when you give your time and your expertise plus your money to an individual organization or to an individual cause, and be willing to say no to a lot of other things, I think you enrich your own life while you are hopefully addressing the problem. I mean, I believe philanthropy is both helping somebody else, but it's also making yourself feel rich and enriching your own life. I see it as a very self-satisfying thing. And the best way to do that and to be the most effective with your money and your time is to really concentrate into a problem. And if you were able to engage your talents and your money towards a narrow problem with a narrow organization, I think you could really make a difference. But I don't think you can make a difference if I've got 20 different things, I send $50, or if your means allow, I send $500 to 20 different organizations. It's probably not going to be that meaningful, and you probably will not be enriched in your life in that way, nor are you probably getting to the root of 20 different problems, I think.
Yeah. You say that ultimately happiness is about giving. If you achieve wealth, that giving is what's going to give you ultimate happiness. Is that the way most people look at it?
I think it's a key. I think it's hard to be happy if you don't have anything to give, if you don't have either time or talent or money to give. It doesn't have to be much money or any money. I think if you gave of yourself and your talent and your time, that's an important way to give. So I think that's an element of happiness. I think another element of happiness, and I will contrast myself with the FIRE movement, and we can talk about that, what that is, but the idea that you want to retire early, I don't think is something I aspire to, or I wouldn't recommend people aspire to retire early, because I think work is also a key pillar of happiness. That sounds very maybe puritanical or something, but I think work gives us meaning and gives us attachment to the world, and so it also gives us an income, which is lovely. But if I had all the money in the world, I don't think I would not work. I think that would make me feel unattached to the world. So I think work is a key, and giving is a key. And probably some perspective of mortality and value, lining up your values appropriately.
Great.
It's approaching one of the things, yeah.
Very good. Well, thanks so much. My guest this hour has been Michael Taylor. He's a personal financial journalist. He's written a book called The Financial Rules for New College Graduates, Invest Before Paying Off Debt and Other Tips Your Professor Didn't Teach You. You can find out more about him and his blog at his website, bankers-anonymous.com. Thanks so much for being a great guest on the Money Answer Show, Michael.
Jordan Goodman, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks again. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Money Answer Show. Goodbye for now.
Thank you for joining Jordan Goodman and the Money Answer Show. If you have a question for Jordan, please visit his website at www.moneyanswers.com. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time right here on Voice America Business. See you next week.